Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Cabinet. I'm Councillor Perai Ahmet. I'm the Leader of the Council and Chair of the Cabinet. So for the public record, we have Cabinet members in the room and they will introduce themselves in a bit, as well as a number of senior officers. Some non-Cabinet members may also be present, and additional officers are also joining the meeting in person and virtually online. If any virtual attendees wish to speak, they should indicate with the yellow hand icon, and this will be picked up in the meeting. And this meeting is being streamed live and recorded by the council for subsequent broadcast via the internet site. So if I can ask the Cabinet members to introduce themselves. So I'll go this way. So Seema, and state their portfolio area, please.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Seema Chandwani, Cabinet Member for Tackling Inequality and Resident Services.
Lucia Desneves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Councillor Dana Carlin, Cabinet Member for Finance and Inward Investment.
Sarah Williams, Housing Services, Private Renters and Planning.
Sina Brabazon, Cabinet Member, Children's Schools and Families.
Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for House Building, Placemaking and the Local Economy.
And Emily Arkell, Cabinet Lead for Culture, Communities and Leisure.
Thank you. And can I ask that any other speakers introduce themselves when they do speak? Okay, have we got apologies?
We've got apologies from Councillor Hakata.
Thank you. Any urgent business?
None.
Okay. Do any Cabinet members have a declaration of interest to make? Councillor Desneves.
Chair, I have a personal prejudicial interest in respect of item 12 on the agenda, and I'll be withdrawing from the meeting for the consideration of that item in accordance with Part 5, Section A, paragraphs 10.1 and 10.2 of the Council's Constitution.
Thank you. Councillor Chandwani.
Leader, I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect to item 12. And so I'll be withdrawing from the meeting. And I also have a personal prejudicial interest in respect to item 13, and I will be withdrawing from the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you both. Can we go? Oh, sorry, item 5, notice of intention to conduct business in private. So there were no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on the agenda. Item 6, the minutes. Can Cabinet confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of July 2023 as a correct record, please? Agreed. Thank you. In terms of the agenda, there's going to be a slight variation because we have 3 deputations in relation to item 17 on the agenda. Oh, apologies. Sorry. Sorry, I could only see one, but I thought the others might be somewhere else. Okay, so we have, let me just correction, we have 1 deputation in relation to item 17 on the agenda, the integrated waste and cleansing contract, and the agenda shall be varied, and I'll take item 7 after item 8, followed by item 17, and we will then continue the agenda from item 9. Item 8, matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There are none. So if we can move to item 7, which is deputations, petitions and questions. So we have 15 minutes in total for this item. And if I can now take a deputation from Sean Fox and Liam O'Donoghue in relation to item 17, the integrated waste and cleansing contract. So you know the drill, but you have 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
That's not me. I'll move mine over there just in case it was. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Leader, for receiving the deputation. As was said, I'm Sean Fox from Unison. On my right-hand side, Liam O'Donoghue, who is our organiser for the private sector. We asked for the deputation because the item in question is proposing to extend the current Veolia contract for a further 2 years to take it to 2027. While we understand the reasons and we've had useful conversations with officers about the reasons, our concern is the impact that will have upon the current staff cohort at Veolia. The contract with Veolia has now been out, or will have been out, for 15 years by the time we get to 2025. That means, and a large chunk of it was out from 2001. That means the vast majority of staff on the contract are no longer conditioned to Haringey conditions, and they no longer have access to the Haringey pension scheme. From the last pay negotiations we did, I believe there were about 50 out of 280 who still retain Haringey conditions of service. So our primary concern, and I make no bones about it, is the detrimental effect that a delay in what I would hope to be an insourcing or some model that would be closer to an insourcing than the current arrangements will worsen the experience of staff. And just to give you a couple of practical examples of what we're talking about. So many on the committee will be familiar with our pension scheme. It's a good pension scheme. It's a public sector scheme. It's a career average scheme. It provides security in retirement. The Veolia pension, unfortunately, does not. It's a statutory minimum nest type scheme for those who might be familiar with that phraseology. Veolia make the minimum contribution required by law, which is 3%. The staff are required to contribute more. So it will not produce a decent pension. And we're already seeing some of the impacts of that from some of the staff, because there are people working on that contract, sweeping your streets and emptying your bins, who are 70 years of age because they cannot afford to retire. That's not a place that, as a good local authority, we would hope you would want to be. Aside from the pensions, their sick pay is worse. We managed to negotiate some improvements to sick pay the year before last, but previously staff got no sick pay whatsoever for the first 4 days of absence. Now they get it after 1 day, but only if they haven't been absent for the previous 12 months. So for those who aren't familiar, our sick pay runs from day one and it protects people from loss of earnings. Their holidays are worse. Pretty much every condition of service you can think of in the local authority is inferior at Veolia. Strangely enough, and this amazed me when I looked at it, the only one which is possibly slightly better is their maternity policy, which might reflect the makeup of their workforce, I suspect, because the workforce is around 92% men, so they obviously don't take maternity pay. Their shared parental leave is like ours, not harmonised. So what we are seeking, our preference would be that you don't extend the contract, frankly, but in the absence of not extending the contract, that serious consideration is given to whether there can be a requirement for harmonisation of terms and conditions from April 2025. And particularly, I think for us, our biggest concern, as I said, is actually the pension scheme of all things, because you've got an ageing workforce who are going to be working, frankly, until they drop, because they can't afford not to, because they won't have any security in retirement at all. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I think I'll leave it there, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Do any cabinet members have any questions for the deputation? Okay, Seema, you're going to respond.
Thank you, Sean and Patrick, for coming today and raising some really important issues. I think as a administration, we've always been quite clear that terms and conditions and our staff welfare is something that we take really seriously. And this is why we've decided to go down this option. Presently, where we're at the moment is, unfortunately, if we were to make a decision now, all of the variables are swaying to the fact that we go back out to outsourcing. And where I really want to be is I want us to make sure that we take the decision of insourcing seriously, but do that at a time that all the variables don't sway us in one particular way. If we look at some of the variables, we've got a HGV driver shortage. There's a sector staff shortage. A lot of the people in the sector have gone back home to the EU because of Brexit and because of COVID. We have a problem with the manufacturing of the fleet. We have a problem with legislation changes that are due to come and been delayed by government. And I guess what I didn't want, and what we all didn't want as a cabinet, is we make decisions under this climate, and those decisions are trying to fit, especially with the cost of living and the fuel rises, are trying to fit in a budget envelope, which would have actually led to job losses. And so the option of bringing the service in-house is still very much on the table. What this has done is given us an extra 2 years. And I appreciate for those staff who are in their late 60s, early 70s, they haven't got that time, but this allows us to do it properly. I hear your request about whether the negotiations to extend the contract could include a harmonisation of the T's and C's. And I know that the staff are meeting with you, and that's something that can be discussed. But at the same token, there is a reason why things are outsourced, and sometimes they do it cheaper because they do squash on the T's and C's. And this is why we really do need to take the option of bringing it in-house seriously. I know that you've met the new director, Barry, on a couple of occasions, and I know that Hubert, the assistant director, and Beth, the head of service, are engaging with you on this. And the great thing is that we're going to have to do a lot more engagement, and we've got time to do that engagement in the next 2 years. 2 years sounds like a long time. I can tell you that I've been discussing this and looking at this for 2 years, and it went pretty fast. So it will come fast. And if you look at the timeline that we've got to make the decision for 2027, we're going to have to make it a lot sooner than that. And that's when we can know what we're going to do. If we do have to make the decision that we will go back out to outsourcing on a full-time contract, not an extension, but a 12 or 15-year contract, then one of the things we need to make sure is the terms and conditions, because you're absolutely right. That we've seen staff being tupied over from contract to contract to contract over years. We've got staff that have different holidays. They're all doing the same job. You could have 3 sweepers on 3 different roads with different holiday entitlement, different sick pay entitlement, and that was none more so more kind of prevalent when it came down to COVID, and the fight that myself and the 2 unions that represent those workers had to do to get them sick pay from day one, because if people were coming into work, they were contaminating their colleagues because they weren't getting paid. So we know that there is a huge problem here. You're right to raise it. These are the reasons that we want to bring it in-house a serious consideration. And I'm really glad that the staff are engaging with you, and I hope that that continues.
Thank you. And just to echo that, I'm happy to hear that the staff are engaging, and that will continue. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you. So if we can move on to item 17, which is the integrated waste and cleansing contract. Seema, if you can introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Leader, and apologies. So as you just heard, we our current waste contract, which currently sits with Veolia, is due to come to an end in April 2025. Over the past 18 to 24 months, the staff have really been considering what our next options would be, so that they could give us an informed recommendation on which direction we should go into. Unfortunately for us, it couldn't have been at a worse time. We've just come out of a global health pandemic, and that's also, and we've also just are seeing the start of what Brexit really looks like when it's not on the side of a bus. And what we have seen is that there's a HGV driver shortage, and if we were to make the decision to bring it in-house or to outsource at this stage, we would have to absorb the extra cost for that. There is an issue with the sector staff. The staff in the sector, there is a shortage. A lot of our staff were from people from migrants from EU communities who have decided to go back or have been caught up in Brexit and have had to leave. We would need to purchase our own fleet, and there is a huge delay because of Brexit in purchasing our own fleet, but because the manufacturing has seized up. There is legislation changes that have been due year after year and been kicked back a year and a year and a year, as we've seen 3 prime ministers and God knows how many ministers in this area of work that have asked for an extra year each time. If those legislation changes do go ahead, it will change the staffing that we need, it will change the fleet that we need, it would basically change the whole way that the service is run. We've got a fuel crisis at the moment, and the cost of actually running our trucks is pretty high, and so this is something we'll also have to absorb. What the staff have come up with and what we're recommending with here today is that actually we take this opportunity to have a 2-year extension with Veolia. on the same conditions and the same service and the same cost. And that basically gives us an extra 2 years, allows some of these variables to possibly settle. Hopefully, we will see a drop in inflation. We will see it. We're already starting to see a bit of a drop in fuel charges, and we can make an informed decision based at a time where it's more settled and not make a decision now where it's turbulent. If we were to make a decision now, we would have to seriously consider major service reductions and staff reductions to fit in a budget envelope with this current climate of all of the extra costs and all of the extra inflation and the fuel cost and the agency costs for all the staff that needs yet to be trained. So I personally recommend this. I'm happy to take questions. I appreciate it's complicated, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion, but I'm happy to answer questions. And I know that Beth Waltzer is online, and so is Barry next to me.
Thank you, Councillor Chanwani. Any questions from members of the Cabinet? No, I believe we've got Councillor Nick Da Costa online with a question. Hi, Nick, when you're ready.
Thank you so much. And Seema, welcome back. It's great to see you back again. With regards to the report, it states the current performance mechanism, which penalises Veolia for failing to hit its targets, its recycling targets, will discontinue in 2025. If this is the case, why do we expect to increase the why do you expect to increase the recycling rate up, even with the low level targeted?
Can I just check if you have any more questions, or?
That's the sole question on this point.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you for welcoming me back. What I have missed out in the paper, and thank you for nudging me and reminding me so gracefully, is that we are actually insourcing the outreach and community education team. And what we did do a few years ago, before my time, is that was one of the first kind of cuts that came when we first had cuts coming to local government. They were predicated on each other. So in order to get people to behaviour change and change how they recycle and make sure that they recycle more, we were basically having an outreach team to do that education. We cut that, and what we found ourselves in is a weird situation with Veolia, where we were finding them for not meeting a target, but they didn't have the resources to meet the target. So one of the things we've done is we've taken their resource back in-house. And we're joining it up with our comms team, and we're joining it up with our recycling officer, and we're also making sure that there is more continuity with the NLWA and their recycling strategy, because at the moment it's quite fragmented, that we've got a council comms team, and then we've got Veolia with their community outreach, and then we've got NLWA with their comms team, that actually we're trying to bring that together. Now, if we take away the resource from Veolia, we can't then fine them for not achieving that. So we felt that that was a fair kind of trade and compromise. So we have now taken on the responsibility of using the outreach team, the comms work, and the education staff to drive up our ambition to get to 50%, which is the mayor's target. I hope that helps. And sorry for not mentioning it in my introduction. Get totally wound up with HGV drivers. I forget about that bit.
Sorry, this isn't appropriate. Can we ask you to leave, please? Well, this isn't the time to reach me. Can I ask you to leave, please? Can we ask you to leave the meeting, please? You're disrupting the meeting. We've got some very important business to get through tonight. So can I ask you to leave, please? Can I ask you to leave, please? Okay, so I think that's all the questions online. So if we can, well, the resolution, which we'll be looking at after consideration of exempt information, at item 26. So we'll be coming back to that. Okay, item 9, which is the annual youth justice plan. Councillor Brabazon, if you can introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to bring this report to Cabinet. The Youth Justice Plan is an annual statutory plan. It's really important that we have a clear, comprehensive and thorough plan which looks at all aspects of the youth justice system. Obviously, working to prevent young people from entering the youth justice system and to support those who have to be rehabilitated is vital, complex and detailed work. The local authority leads this, and we work with a wide range of partners to support young people who are at risk of either entering the system or who are going through it. But as I said, this is a statutory regulated service, and we are required to produce an annual youth justice plan, which is attached after the body of the report is attached as an appendix to this document. We are asking Cabinet tonight to consider and endorse this, and then we will be able to move forward and take it to full council. It's an important part of the process to get Cabinet oversight and to give the overarching plan attention and priority within the services. As colleagues will know, Children's Services is subject to many inspections, and the annual Youth Justice Plan is no exception. It is a statutory regulated service and therefore inspected by, and youth offending services are inspected by Her Majesty's Inspector of Probation. So the report sets out how this service will run and provides a framework for the service, but also should we be inspected, they will be able to see where the work is. We also have a young people at risk strategy, community safety strategy, and the corporate delivery plan, all of which contribute to the overarching youth justice plan. I sit as a member of the Youth Justice Board and Partnership and can confirm that we have discussed this at great length and held an away day, and I'm really pleased to commend it to the Cabinet. And if you have any question, Jackie can talk to the report, or Anne is here to talk to me.
Okay. Are there any questions from the Cabinet on this? No. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Zena, for the report. 2 questions from myself. The first question, the report makes reference to the reduction in reoffending being down to the, quote, decriminalisation of young people, end quote. Could you explain a little bit further what you mean by this?
Can you just give me the reference, the page reference?
Oh, I don't have the page reference on me. Apologies. Bear with me. Let me just scroll through. Whilst I try and find the page reference, is it okay if I ask the second question whilst I scroll through the pages?
Mm-hmm.
So the second question with regards to page 25, just found it.
Right. Okay. So I'll just try and find it where you are. Oh, I see. It's paragraph 6.9.
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Sorry, I had all I had on my sheet was 6, and I've been scrolling through it myself, trying to find it. So that's the first. The second question relates to the statistics for attendance of the Youth Justice Management Board, with a couple of examples of 20% attendance and one of 0% attendance. Is this a concern to you?
Right, I'm going to take the second question. I'm going to pass the first question to Jackie. Yes, and it's already being addressed. That was one of the reasons why we had the away day, and there has been a great deal of concern about the poor attendance, and that this is now being tackled. So I can assure you it is a great concern. As I said, we had an away day. I attended as a member of the board, spoke to the officers. It was extremely successful.
Thank you, Councillor. Jackie Falk, Assistant Director for Early Help Prevention and SEND. So in terms of decriminalisation, what we mean by that is when we consider the wider context that's going on for a child or a young person and look at that in the context of the impact that has on their offending behaviour. So an example may be and has been that we've developed a policy and practice guidance. And a good example is children who are in residential care. They will often have come from traumatic experiences, there may be volatile behaviour, and so we ask professionals to consider that in the wider context before progressing through a criminal route. And we've seen the impact of that. So training of staff, raising awareness has led to thinking about how we can support those young people in alternative ways rather than going down a punitive approach.
Thank you, Jackie. Nick, that was all your questions, right? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve recommendations as set out at page 23. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. Item 10, Haringey Send top up and high needs funding banding. Over to you again, Councillor Brabazon.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. This is a really, really welcome and important report and is asking Cabinet really to give us approval for Children's to undertake public consultation on the proposed changes in the way we fund special educational needs, top-ups and banding, and how we fund children with special needs within our schools and other services. I'll try and make it as clear as I can, but it is quite complicated because it is about the way in which the high needs block, which is the funding element within the dedicated schools grant, is deployed in order to fund children who have an educational care and health plan. So to move further on my introduction, as I've said, funding to support children with special needs, which comes from central government. It is located within the high needs block within the DSG. We have to ensure that these resources are allocated fairly and transparently, obviously to support all children with special needs, and this is a critical task which underpins this report. When we entered the safety valve agreement with the DfE as a condition of participation, the Council committed to review the way in which resources for children with special educational needs are allocated. This has led to a further review of the funding structure, which involves introducing bandings, which go, I think, from A to H, and top-up allocations to ensure that how we allocate money is fair, open, transparent, and meets the needs of all children, not skewed to particular groups. The review has been expensive, and to my extensive, probably has been extensive. Happily, I think the people who've contributed to it have done it freely as head teachers, governors and officers, and has been wide ranging and has gone on for, I think, for over some 2 years, in fact. Officers have worked with many vital and key stakeholders to develop the new proposal. Safety Valve has given this a particular urgency with the aim of allocating the funding more fairly across an area where there are so many special needs, so many disabilities, and we have to be seen to be fair. The working review group included parents and carers, representatives from mainstream and special schools, specialist teaching staff, health colleagues, educational psychologists, with an aim to develop different sets of banding descriptors designed to meet the needs of children with SEND more effective and accurately. It's been a long, long process, and as a member of the Schools Forum, I can confirm it has come to many, many meetings over this period as progress has been reported. I'm delighted that there's been consensus across all the working groups that this has been a very good example of collaborative and co-production work, and I am really happy to present the report to Cabinet, and I hope you'll endorse this so we can now go out to consultation and we can finally move to the next phase of changing how we fund children with special educational needs across all the bandings, from those with the least restrictive and least needs to those with the highest needs, and reflect that more fairly across our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon. Any questions from the Cabinet? No, I think that was a very thorough introduction. Thank you. I can't, is Councillor Da Costa, has he got his? Sorry, I haven't got my glasses. Please go ahead, Nick.
That's all right, don't worry. Thank you, Zena, as well for that report. A national reporting has revealed the Department of Education is targeting a 20% reduction in new EHCPs issued in councils, which are part of the Safety Valve programme. Though this target has not yet been communicated to councils which are part of the programme, do you think participation will reduce the number of EHCPs given out? And following on from that, assuming you think there may be, or it is believed there will be a reduction, do you see this as a positive outcome of the scheme, or is essentially central government forcing a cut in provision which could negatively impact those who have previously received EHCPs but now won't?
That's a really good question. And some of it is political and some of it I think I'm going to hand over to the officers. In terms of what I think about the government, the reason there is a safety valve programme from my point of view, I hope I speak for my colleagues, is that special needs, because it was underfunded in 2014, has led to local authorities like Haringey overspending. There are some 55 local authorities, I think it is, involved in safety valve across the country. I may be wrong that figure, but I think that's relatively accurate, and certainly there are many. And all of them are overspending because they're fundamentally underfunded from the beginning. The government is now trying to remedy that through a programme which they invited us to join. If we didn't join it, we would be sanctioned by the government and they would possibly use the overspend and apply it to our general fund. So it is a a programme in which we have to participate, and it offers us some opportunity to remedy some inconsistencies, some practices, make some changes, and we have grasped it with both hands in order to do that. The question of EHCPs is very contentious. There's no doubt about it. However, there are ways in which we can meet children's needs prior to EHCPs, particularly with very young children, when diagnosis and assessments are not yet sorted. And I'm going to hand over to the officers in order to respond more fully to that question.
Thank you, Councillor. So just to confirm that there is absolutely no target prescribed by the DfE to reduce EHCPs. What we were invited to do as part of our safety valve is to develop proposals that we thought would reduce the need for new education healthcare plans as a result of early intervention. In Haringey, we do have a higher than average across London and nationally. And so we have said that we're committed to bringing that in line with London and national averages, and that's our commitment. I do anticipate that this work will lead to a reduction of children needing an education healthcare plan, because we have 18 projects that are tailored around early intervention. So a good example of those with the bandings and top-ups is moving from 4 to 8 band allows us to introduce a banding that is pre-EHCP, and it offers school a small amount of funding to be able to support those children with immersion needs, some dedicated resource and support to prevent that need for escalation, and therefore a plan later down the line. That's an example of one of the projects.
So thank you, Jackie.
I hope that was clear, Nick.
Okay. So if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 146. So we're all in agreement. Agreed? Okay. Item 11, the food action plan. Councillor Arkell.
Thank you. The cost of living crisis has impacted many Haringey residents' ability to purchase and access healthy and good quality food, with many relying on food banks across the borough, which emerged in the pandemic due to the unmet demand during that period of time. The price of food rose by 14.9% in the year to July 2023, according to the latest Consumer Prices Index, and this is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. The primary aim of the Food Action Plan presented in this paper is to support efforts across the borough to tackle food insecurity. The plan will support access to good quality and nourishing food, recognising the important role that this has in improving educational attainment and mental health, It will acknowledge the important role food plays in bringing communities together and the important role that food businesses play in the local economy and can play in economic development across the borough. And it will encourage residents to participate in food sustainability by supporting them and their neighbours to grow food. Due to the urgent and pressing demand to support efforts to tackle food insecurity and emergency food provision, the plan is designed to be a dynamic and action-focused document. There are 4 main pillars, including, firstly, emergency and crisis food provision of food, secondly, healthy eating, thirdly, sustainability, and finally, food businesses. The pillars will be overseen by a core oversight group, which will monitor the development and direction of the action plan. The plan is a collaborative effort, and we have met with the Haringey Community Food Network at an early stage to seek their views and input. The plan sets out the council's role and relationship in working with our partners and key stakeholders to support resilient food networks and ensures that no resident goes hungry. The role of food is in promoting health and well-being is understood, and that food culture within the borough is understood and maximised.
Thank you. Questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Da Costa.
Hello, me again. Thank you very much for that and for the report. 2 questions. The report states that the strategy arises from, quote, discussion and engagement with the VCS and partners, largely during and immediately after the COVID pandemic, end quote. Has there been an effort to revisit some of these partners since the pandemic to ensure the strategy isn't out of date? And then my follow-up to that is, and has there been any engagement with local small businesses or market traders about their view on the strategy and how they could potentially engage?
Thanks for those questions. So, as I mentioned, we've met with the Haringey Community Food Network at the end of last month to bring them right up to date about the plans and how we're planning to plan for the strategy. We haven't met with businesses yet, but that is certainly part of the plan and with other key stakeholders as we go forward in developing the food action plan.
Thank you. Okay, if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 194. Are we all in agreement? Oh, yeah. Okay, so I believe Councillor Dasnevs and Chanwani now need to leave the room, so we'll just pause. So they've both now left the room. So if we can move to item 12, which is the contract award to KCA Design and Architectural Services for the Selby Urban Village Master Plan. There you go. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very pleased to come forward to the Cabinet with this report. When it's not a report asking for extra money, but it's a report for asking for permission to start drawing down and taking the project forward in order to take us to a stage where we can go to planning. We took a report at the previous Cabinet meeting in March, I think it was, for an order for us to accept the £20 million Levelling Up funding that we got, and this is us now coming back to move the process forward. And in the intervening period, we've been working together with our partners in the Selby Trust, and the project. There's been a, well, we hope it has been anyway, an exemplar project in collaboration and working with partners and working with the local community. What we hope this scheme will provide will be wonderful services in terms of sport and recreation on the one hand, and housing delivery on the other, when it is completed. So we are working now in phases. Obviously, we are facing challenges, as everybody knows, you know, with the increased interest rates and with increased costs for construction and so on. So what we've done is we've been working really closely with the Selby Trust to develop a way in phasing this so that we can deliver and we can use the money that has been provided through Levelling Up Fund and to make it a phased approach. And that's what we want to seek your approval to do as part of that process. And this first stage is to be awarding the contract with KCA. They've been working with us before. Rather than going out to new contract, we think it's more cost effective to award the further contract to KCA, because that way the plans can be taken forward that much more effectively and cost effectively, will produce value for money for the scheme. And we would obviously be coming back to Cabinet for when we would be in a position to be moving forward at the next stage, having received planning permission and so on.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Any questions from the Cabinet? No. Councillor Da Costa?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the report. The report notes that community infrastructure and housing are being required to return to REBA Stage 2 in order to reduce costs. It goes on to outline how community infrastructure's costs might be cut, but doesn't mention housing. Whilst I appreciate that you probably don't have all the exact details yet, what are these cost-saving measures for the housing section of the scheme expected to look like? And the second question I have is the viability assessment notes a working deficit of 3 to 5.5 million for the scheme. Given current market conditions and the council's financial position, is there a very real risk that the project won't materialise and the figures being agreed to this evening will essentially be lost?
Oh, I'd lost you for a moment there. Thank you for that. So in terms of the cost savings, the reason we'd have to go back a stage, a REBA stage, and get the officers to confirm the sort of technical details of this is because actually we are putting forward a slightly different scheme now, and that's part of the proposals tonight, that we've got this phasing. It means that we can actually use the upfront funding from the Levelling Up Fund to actually move that forward in terms of the sports and community facilities and get that underway, and giving us the time and the room to work on the housing separately. There is always, you know, when we're in this stage, this is quite a large development, and there is always at this stage workings through to be done, and we think we've addressed a large part of that, and we will still keep taking it through the sort of mill, if you like, of you know, some value engineering, some changes and so on, and which we will be agreeing with our partners, and we've managed to do that quite effectively so far. So I feel fairly confident that we are, you know, we're able to deliver this, but I think it's more manageable to do it in stages. And the good thing is that we can start delivering some of the amenities up front in terms of the sporting amenities and so on, and that means that we can see progress. There's no danger to the council funding as we're using the Levelling Up Fund money. We won't have to reimburse it and so on. Whatever we spend, we can retain. If that's, I hope that's, but I'm maybe ask a director to add anything that I've missed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gordon, and I'm David Joyce, Director of Placemaking and Housing, for those who haven't met me. So the report does set out the main elements that we're looking at in terms of trying to revisit the costs of the scheme given the inflationary environment that we're working within, and Councillor Gordon set them out. We've been working with the Selby Centre on a sports hall options appraisal, and also a sort of community centre building optimisation to really make sure we maximise the efficiency of the building so that it works extremely effectively once we've built it for the Selby Centre. So those are the areas where we're focusing on. In terms of the housing elements of the scheme, which is the report notes, will be looked at as part of our phase 2 of the scheme. All of the processes that we will follow as part of our housing programme will be the normal gateway processes to ensure those schemes, that scheme is as efficient as possible and meeting all of the hurdles that we require for our housing schemes to be considered viable. But we are very confident that we will be able to get into that position. I think it's also worth saying that the exercise has involved looking at other potential sources of funding as well, including, as the report notes at 6.19, the potential for brownfield land release funding.
Thank you, David. Okay, if we, the resolution is to approve the recommendations after the consideration of exact information at item 24. So if we can just ask or wait for Councillor Dustneves to come back in the room. Councillor Chamwani will remain out of the room for the next item, which is item 13, which is the request award of a contract of integrated lifestyle change programme known as Haringey One New Haringey. Sorry. And if I can ask Councillor Dustneves to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's a gap in healthy life expectancy between the wealthiest, that's healthy life expectancy, between the wealthiest and most deprived parts of the borough of about 15 years, which means that people are experiencing poor health in some parts of the borough from their mid-50s. Heart disease, cancer and strokes are the biggest cause of early death in the borough, and they're frequently preventable. The integrated lifestyle service that we're continuing to provide or proposing to continue to provide through this decision helps tackle many of the preventable risk factors for these conditions, including smoking, unhealthy weight and excess alcohol use. The model involves capacity building training where health ambassadors are recruited and trained from diverse communities to bridge barriers and increase outreach. The service is geared towards tackling inequality, with activity being targeted in areas with the highest need. Please be aware, so I recommend this report to you, but please be aware that there's a minor error in the report at paragraph 3.1 and 10.3.4, which makes reference to taking the decision as a Cabinet member signing. However, this decision has been published on the forward plan as a Cabinet decision, and the paragraph now reads, recommendation 3.1, pursuant to CS 0907, Cabinet grants approval to the award of contract for the provision of the integrated lifestyle change programme to the successful tenderer identified in Appendix 1, Part B, exempt information for this report. The contract shall run for a period of 4 years, commencing on the 1st Feb and to the 31st of January 2028, at a max annual cost of 53995, with an option to extend for a further period or periods for up to a total of 4 years at a maximum total cost of 4,319,800, including the proposed extension period. The award is a key decision and can be approved by Cabinet in accordance with CS 9.0.1, contracts valued at 500k or more. The Head of Legal and Governance confirms that there are no legal reasons for preventing Cabinet from approving this recommendation, the recommendations in this report.
Thank you, Councillor Dustneves. Any questions? Councillor Arkell.
Thank you for the report. Integration is a bit of a buzzword in terms of the delivery of healthcare services, particularly in acute and long-term conditions. But I was just wondering if you could outline what the benefits are to residents of taking this integrated approach, because integration is a word that's easy to say but very difficult to implement for the end users of the service.
Thanks for the question. It's a really important one. I think being able to bring together those services, when you look at them across in the report, you'll see that they're often interconnected, and you'll often find people who need support on one or more of the different aspects of this service, and it enables us to actually maximise that benefit when our team are with someone and they can see there are a range of issues that we're maximising the benefit and making sure that we're tackling them in the round and looking at them holistically. We know that it's been really difficult for many local authorities to fund services like this across the board, and some aspect many local authorities have found it difficult to do that. We're quite proud that we continue to be able to support the community with the statutory and other elements of it. And we understand that quite a few local authorities are looking at this integrated mechanism because we see benefits for the individuals concerned and therefore for outcomes across the whole of the borough.
Thank you. Any more questions from the Cabinet? Don't think Councillor Da Costa's got a question on this one. Okay, I can't see any online. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendation, this will be after the consideration of exempt information at item 25. So if we can just ask Councillor Chamwani to come back. So if we can go to item 14, which is the 23-24 finance update, Q1. Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, Haringey, like almost all other local authorities, is finding it increasingly difficult to deliver within the parameters of the budgets which we have. And we see the pressures specifically within adults' social care and to a certain extent within children's. This is not unusual across the country. The government, as I said at our last cabinet meeting, is failing to properly fund local authorities to provide these services. The end of Q1 shows that the pressures that we saw coming out of the end of year outturn are continuing within our social service budgets and also making it difficult for us to deliver savings in an environment of ever increasing interest rates and inflation. However, officers are working extremely hard to reduce the in-year spend this year and to find savings and to identify new savings. We're also looking, as is outlined in the paper, at our capital programme and looking to reduce that because of the revenue implications going forward within our MTFS. Haringey is certainly, as I've said, not the only borough facing these problems, and nor is it in any way within the boroughs facing the most pressures. But we do have to concentrate on delivering the savings this year and going forward. Thank you.
Any questions from the Cabinet? No. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dana, for the report. The report frequently cites the spend and overspend within the Adults Directorate. Given the significant focus on reducing the overspend in this area to manage expectations, how frequently have savings within adults been realised over the last decade versus overspending? And as a percentage of the council's budget, how does adults in Haringey compare to the other London boroughs? Shall I give you my next two questions now, or should we do this question first and then the next two?
No, do all of them and then
cool. Okay,
we can take all the questions.
Fine. So also with regard to capital schemes, thank you for providing additional detail, but our group has regularly flagged the dangers of the council's capital programme and level of expected borrowing over the past couple of years, given the increasing interest rates and global events. Has the council heeded these concerns, and how much would it have saved in spending so far on projects that are now being dropped? And the final question is, why have the council's accounts remained unaudited for such a long period?
Sorry, I'm just writing down your final question. First to your first question, which is whether we've actually managed to achieve savings within adult social care over the past 10 years. I'll have to refer that to my Director of Finance, as I do not have that information to hand.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, and whilst you wouldn't expect me to be able to give you the exact figures for that, I can absolutely advise members that adults has had quite a considerable savings agenda year on year to be delivered. Certainly since I joined the authority, which is my period of knowledge, which is 6 years ago. And it has been, you know, one of the material parts of our savings agenda, and sometimes the largest part of our savings agenda. So yes, there has been a constant expectation on the Directorate to produce more efficient ways of working and deliver things in different ways. That is somewhat disguised by the fact that at the same time, and particularly in the last few years, adults has been very heavily exposed to other effects, COVID, inflation, changes in the market, and all those other things which are well versed, which have probably disguised that savings agenda, but it has been there. Thank you.
Thank you. Going on to your second question, I don't have the exact figures across London for adults, but anecdotally, it appears that most authorities are spending around 70% of their budget on adults and children's, and that's across the country. Sometimes their adults are a bit higher and children's a bit lower, or vice versa. But the position of most authorities is that around 70% of the budget is being spent on adult and children's social care. There is, as noted in the paper, also an increased pressure on housing demand and housing needs, which in Haringey sits within our adults directorate. And that is also causing huge pressures to other authorities to often a greater extent than we're seeing in Haringey. In terms of capital, I can't give you exact figures in terms of our capital budget. I'm not sure, John, whether you can come back on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the budget report, the quarter one report, describes to members the fact that the authority is completely alive to the points that Councillor Costa made there, and about the circumstances which are affecting the affordability of our capital programme, and has been proactive in this year, already in this quarter, and you will see from the report the extent of the considered reductions that are described for approval in this financial year. And at the same time, as you would expect, the work is underway to prepare for the MTFS and the budget for next and future years. And obviously, the consciousness of the cost of capital and the overall revenue position that we're in are two very important factors in that work, and will have a bearing on the size of the capital programme going forward.
Thank you. And finally, your question with regard to auditing of accounts. This is a nationwide, certainly England-wide problem. Auditors are provided to us, and there's a lack of capacity within the system. Nobody's having their accounts audited, and it's a huge risk, because if there are errors or anything, you know, we're assuming we just haven't been audited. There's absolutely nothing that we can do about it as an individual council, other than to lobby very strongly, which we are doing, about the disgraceful state of affairs. But all authorities are in the same position, and it's a risk to the entire sector. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 233. We all in agreement? Agreed. Okay, item 15, reduction and recycling plan 2023 to 25. Councillor Chanwani.
Thank you, Leader. So every few years we have to report back to the Greater London Authority a reduction and recycling plan. I'm hoping Sadiq isn't listening because it's actually a really boring template. So I do want those of you that are reading this to realise that we're answering questions rather than us developing an actual plan that's got recycling in it. In this paper, though, in section 6.13, we've outlined some of the initiatives that we've been doing to get our recycling up. Earlier on today, you've also heard that we're bringing over the outreach and education team to focus on recycling and have a more direct grip on that. And in 6.14, there are some initiatives that we're currently working on to achieve our recycling target and the mayor's 50%. The recycling the reduction in recycling plan has to come to Cabinet to be ratified before we can send it to the GLA. So that's why we're here today. I'll leave my comments there and happy to take any questions.
Questions? Okay, Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report, Seema. The report makes repeated reference to the target of recycling at 50% of waste by 2030. Yet next year, the council is only targeting a 32% of waste to be recycled, which is only a really small increase on last year and around about the same levels we're at just over a decade ago. Don't you think that a target not matching our performance in 2012 is pretty unambitious? And is the 50% target anything more than just a pipe dream? And then the second question is, the report indicates the council will only consider removing green waste charges if government funding is received, despite stating the levels of use are still below the 2017 period when the charges were introduced. And the later report on cleaning contracts stating that free collections typically result in 80 to 90% participation, compared with 35% in councils without charges. Additionally, in the finance update, the increases to garden waste fees are rated as red, with the revenue target being missed again for this year. Do you not agree that charging for garden waste has been a failure?
Thank you, Nick. Before I answer those questions, I'm really enjoying your Labour red bookshelf. It's good to see that you've actually got something in the right colour. Okay, to take your questions, blue shirt. Well, you know, probably a legacy. So we'll move on. The 50% target is not a council target, it's a GLA target. It's one for across London. We are at 32%. It does look like there's stagnation. However, there has been industry changes about what can be recycled. There's also an issue around lightweighting. So cardboard boxes are a lot lighter than they were a few years ago. We are measured on tonnage. And so when we do have smaller packaging, lighter packaging, we might have more volume of it, but actually it weighs less, which is actually a problem across the country. Do I think that 50% is ambitious? I think that 80% of household waste can be recycled. And I think if we can get people to do that, which is why I'm really keen that we bring and have direct control over our education and outreach, that we actually can explain that to people. In terms of the 35% with green waste, do you know, there was a time that I would love to give things for free, and we had to make this decision because we had a Tory and Lib Dem government that decided to cut local government finance, and we have to have an income strategy. The reason that we're waiting for the CPR from the government is because they want to make proposals to make sure that garden waste is free across every single council and every single borough in the country, and they will fund that. At the moment, we can decide to give this for free. Of course, it will be better for the environment. Of course, there'll be more take up, But what are we going to pay for it with? Somebody's got to collect it, and those people need paying. Somebody's got to dispose of it. Someone's got to recycle it into composting, and the whole process costs money. And so we either make sure that we charge people to get that back, or we cut social workers, or we close youth centres. And these are the tough decisions that your government made us make. And so I'm really hoping that you could go back and fight for us to get money to make sure that we have the basic resources to make sure that we have a cleaner planet. But we're not there yet. Again, I really do like your bookshelf though.
Thank you. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 284. Are we all in agreement? Excellent. Okay, item 16, which is the decision for the undertaking of a statutory public consultation in respect of designating an additional licensing scheme for houses in multiple occupation. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So we know this council is committed to ensuring that Haringey residents have access to a safe, sustainable, stable and affordable home. And with 40% of Haringey's residents living in the private rented sector, and houses in multiple occupancy are a much needed affordable type of accommodation, because they both improving the quality of the private rented sector and reducing the number of households presenting as homeless are key pledges for this council. Additional HMO licensing is designed to improve the quality, safety and management of smaller HMOs not covered by the mandatory licensing. It provides the regulatory framework to support the many good landlords in Haringey, whilst also providing the powers for officers to act against those landlords who rent property that is well below the standards we expect. It's vital that these properties continue to be effectively regulated to ensure they are safe, professionally managed and comply with regulations, and any unlicensed HMO accommodation within our borough needs to be identified and made to licence and comply. It's reassuring for private renters in Haringey to know that landlords cannot evict tenants from their rented property to avoid the licensing schemes. Tenants are protected from no-fault eviction in unlicensed premises because their landlord cannot issue a valid Section 21 notice. Additionally, tenants can claim back rent from landlords in rent repayment orders who have been found to be operating HMO properties without a licence through the courts. So I commend this consultation to everybody. This is a very good thing for Haringey, especially given that we have more residents living within the private rented sector than most other boroughs, and definitely nearly twice the national average.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any questions? Okay, there's none on the screen either. Okay, no, right. So if I can move to the resolution, which is to approve recommendations as set out at page 328. Are we all in agreement? Okay, item 18, which is the corporate performance update. You just have to bear with me while I get the page. There. Okay, so in November 22, we launched the Haringey Deal, and as part of the Haringey Deal was part of our commitment to have a more collaborative relationship with residents. And as part of that, we wanted to be really transparent about the way we work, our successes, and also the areas where we needed to do more. And we wanted to have an absolute honest conversation. So we are absolutely determined to get the basics right across the whole organisation, and that's not going to happen by hiding what hasn't gone well or to keep discussions about what's hard to ourselves. So we need to be open and honest, and we need to know how to plan to overcome the many challenges that we do have. So in our corporate delivery plan and this report on our progress, we are showing our work in across everything we need to do to build a fairer, greener borough. We've tracked how far we've come on our progress this year and given a red, amber, green rating to show that progress. So Without further ado, I'm going to just open up to questions and see if anyone has any for me. No, I'm not an exception, it seems. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Da Costa, have you got a question for me?
Thank you very much. Yes, I have 3 questions. Improved air quality and road safety around schools is listed twice on page 458, once with an amber rating and once with a red rating. Could you clarify the difference between the two, please? The next question is, could you please speak to the progress on the DEN, which is rated red across all categories, but doesn't have much in the way of explanation other than the director's comment that its risk profile has worsened? And then the final question is, quite surprised that the greater use of leisure centres is only rated amber rather than red, given all the problems that have been ongoing, including the pool at Tottenham Green. Could you please explain why the rating is amber rather than red?
Okay, so the one on 458, has anyone got hold of that one in terms of the air quality? Sorry, we're just desperately trying to find that one. Did you say that was on question on page 458, right? And
yes.
Improved air quality and road safety around schools. Apologies, Councillor Hakata's not here, and that's one of his ones, unless he's on the screen.
It's the 5th and 6th.
Barry, are you able to?
Helps.
Yeah, sorry, Leader. I'm just trying to find that one in my particular file, but I can go to one of the others if you want.
David, did you want to take the one on the DENs?
Yeah, I can take the one on the DEN, and we could always come back with a written answer on the air quality one. On the district energy network, the comment that I provided related to, I think, just the increased risk profile that we have for all major capital schemes at the moment because of an increase in inflationary costs around construction, the impact of interest rates in terms of borrowing, which will impact this as a major scheme, and also kind of ongoing volatility in terms of energy markets. And so all of those things together just, I think, led me to conclude in arriving at that judgment that, you know, the risk profile for this scheme is higher than it was, and we need to obviously spend some time working through how we deal with those risks before we move to the next stages of the project.
Thank you, David. Claire, I believe you're going to come back on the air quality one.
Yes, Leader. For those who don't know me, I'm Claire McCarthy, Assistant Director for Strategy, Communications and Collaboration, and I work with the performance team that put together this report with information from across the council. Just to say, the reason there are 2 lines on air quality is because there are 2 sets of actions. So it's a single kind of outcome, but 2 sets of actions. So one of them pertains to the installation of pollution barriers at schools in the borough, and also the implementation of air quality audits. And the second relates to the implementation of school streets. And so that's why there are 2 lines. But you can see that in the original, the full corporate delivery plan has the detail of that, that was obviously brought to Cabinet early in the year.
Thank you, Claire. And in terms of the leisure centres, obviously we're all acutely aware of the challenges presented there and are doing our utmost to forge ahead. And I think we're doing a good job. But I'm going to ask Barry Francis to just comment on that, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, obviously we do have some provision in the borough. It's not the provision that we would like to see. We're still working to try and get Tottenham Green open, and we're working very closely with Fusion to deliver that, and also third-party contractors who are helping us with the works at the pool. We have identified it as an area for attention. You know, we recognise that it is an issue, and it's an issue that we need to be addressing as quickly as possible. Hence the reason for singling it out as part of that, as within the pack. The reason for it not being read is because of the fact that we do still have some provision against what the objective was. So we are still working towards it. It's just not at the pace and not at the scale that we want it to be. We do believe, however, that there is going to be some positive news within the next few months. Again, though, it's subject to a number of variables, but we are confident that we're working to get that pool reopened.
Thank you, Barry. And just to stress, we absolutely appreciate and understand the urgency of this, and we're all pushing officers really hard on this. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 436. Are we all in agreement? Agreed, thank you. Okay, item 19, which is the Haringey Dockless Bike Hire Scheme. This is Councillor Hakata's report, but he's not here with us tonight because he's unwell. He's online, however. Mike, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
You are, okay. So I'm going to introduce the report because I'm here in the room, and then I believe Mike's just going to add something on that. So this report seeks approval to implement a Haringey Dockless Bike Hire Scheme on an initial trial basis for a period of up to 24 months. And this would involve us, the council, entering into a formal agreement with 2 dockless bike providers to enable the rollout of dockless bikes across the borough. 2 suppliers have been identified, Lime and Human Forest, and there was a competitive procurement exercise, and excluding our officer resource, this will be at nil cost to the council, and will go some way to improving our access and opportunities for all who do cycle. Now, there's more to say on this, but I'm going to give Councillor Hakata the opportunity to just say a bit more on the scheme, because he's been working very hard on this.
Thank you, and sorry I can't be with you in person. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I don't seem to be able to operate my camera properly, so it's pointing towards the wall. So I'm afraid, but that's probably not a bad thing. So thanks for introducing that, the report. As people will know, there's been a growing number of bikes across the borough, e-bikes that we've seen across the borough over the last few months. That is not because we've got an agreement, but because there is huge demand for these bikes. 20,000 journeys a month have been taken with them. So what we've done here is to go, well, actually, without an agreement in place, it amplifies some of the worst aspects. So dumped bikes, every bike that's left in the borough at the moment is essentially a dumped bike because we don't have an agreement with parking. And there are also broken bikes that are left discarded, and with an agreement in place, we will not only be able to have marked and geo-fenced parking, but also we'll be able to, the providers will be able to fine inconsiderate parking, and also will allow the provider teams to operate in the borough, which means they should be able to respond, they will respond much quicker. I'll leave it there for now. Obviously happy for someone for questions or to ask the team. Thanks.
And thank you for joining us despite being unwell, Councillor Hakata. I think we may need to field the questions in the room, but you may have a speaking opportunity again. Okay, are there any questions from the Cabinet on this? No. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mike, for joining, even though you're not feeling well. I hope you're feeling better very soon. How much dedicated parking bay provision for bikes do you plan for there to be initially, and are there sort of targeted areas within the borough where they're going to be? And will the electric bike, will the bikes be able to park in the entire area of the borough, or will they be restricted to the bays? Second question then is, will the council then look beyond just introducing a small number of bays in select location and allow for dockless bikes to be parked at any existing bike parking locations, for example, in the thousands of Sheffield stands we have across the borough from day one, so that users have the ability to use and park bikes across Haringey safely? And then does the contract allow for further providers during the 24 months to enter borough, to start working with Haringey, to start working in Haringey, to give residents complete market choice instead of being limited to the 2 providers mentioned, as has had been the case with electric vehicle charging providers?
Okay, Thanks, Nick. Bryce, I believe you're going to answer. You're going to pick up some of these.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the questions. So I think we're starting off from the position that more parking is better in terms of the scheme working smoothly, but of course there needs to be parking in the right locations. As the paper set out, the commitment we're making at the start of the scheme is that there will be marked parking bays in key locations. So that'll be things like high roads, around transport hubs, and around premises where there's sort of a lot of activity, for instance, Alexandra Palace or Tottenham Hotspur Football Stadium. What we like to do is work with the providers to steadily increase parking over time in the right locations. So that's likely to include parking at things like Sheffield stand locations, but that's still to be worked up. But the commitment from day one is that we'll have marked parking bays in key locations. In terms of providers, so it was an open procurement exercise, and we contacted all 4 of the providers who are currently in the market. I understand one is to shortly leave the market, and the third provider opted not to take part within the procurement process. So we've taken an open approach. The contract which we'll be drawing up doesn't preclude us working with another provider in the future. It's very much a case of seeing how the trial goes, seeing what the take up is of the bikes, and then responding to that over time. It is a trial. It's up for 24 months, up to 24 months, sorry. So we'll see how things go on that front.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Bryce. So if we can move on to the resolutions to approve the recommendations are set out at page 481. Do we all agree? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hakata. Thank you, Bryce, as well. Okay. Item 20, minutes of other bodies. Can we note the minutes of other bodies, please? 21, new items of urgent business. I don't believe there's any new items of urgent business. Item 22, which is the exclusion of the press and public. So we will now consider items 23 to 27, which contain exempt information in relation to items 6, 12, 13 and 17. So can I move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of this meeting to consider this exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Do we all agree? Great. Okay, so I'm formally closing the public section of the meeting. Thank you.